2021 has been a wild year. So much has happened that I can't even begin to wrap my mind around the sheer scope of the last almost 12 months. In terms of games, there's been no shortage of some of the best experiences I've had in years. We finally got to see a sequel to Double Fine's Psychonauts in what might be my favorite platformer of all time. There was a new Metroid game, and it was actually pretty good. Surprisingly, Halo was fun again, managing to eat away any spare time I have trying not to bottom frag in lobbies with my friends. And topping it all off, Capcom made maybe my favorite Resident Evil game since 4. Because of, lockdown here in Aotearoa, New Zealand, I've played more games than any other year since starting this channel. Some of those from my years-long growing backlog, but most are just from this one alone, and I've loved it despite the state of the world. It's been a stacked run of gaming on all ends. But with every massive release, there's always a dozen games that slip through the collective consciousness, and that's why I make these videos. To bring whatever attention I can to some games and help someone maybe find a new experience they didn't know about or know that they wanted. It's been a couple of years since I've gotten to make one of my usual indie games you missed videos, and usually I release them at the start of the next year, but I thought I'd sneak it in December this time so people can have things to buy during big sales that happen around this time of year. If you haven't seen one of these before, here's how they usually go. I pick a handful of indie games that have a low amount of Steam user reviews and make a series of short videos of each telling you why you should buy them. I also never do this, but I figured why not try it. If you're new here, please consider liking the video and subscribing to see what I put out in the future. Spookware is what happens when you take the gameplay stylings of WarioWare and mash it together with a DIY version of Paper Mario's aesthetic. Visually, it really caters to that part of my brain that has a nostalgia for growing up in small punk rock communities where every flyer was made from cutting out different pieces of magazines and newspapers to make something completely new. I immediately fell in love with it on that front. On top of that, however, it's a fast-paced collection of micro games led by 3 burnout skeletons just trying to make sense of life in the goofiest ways possible. Spookware comes into its own with a more explorative style map. You walk around, talk to people, and help them solve different problems, usually with games that relate to whatever needs resolving. So far the game consists of one chapter that has 3 episodes and the prologue with around 60 micro games total, but there's more coming down the line. Each episode has their own different narratives and mysteries to solve, so nothing ever feels too repetitive or samey, at least for too long. Games like this are usually hit or miss with what's on offer. It's kind of the nature of massive collections. Statistically, not everything is going to be a banger, but thankfully what's in there more often than not will hit. Going for a quality over quantity approach really worked in the favor of this game, since when you do get around to repeating games, only a very small handful made me grimace instead of getting excited, which is a rare quality. The more open world style of game also means that you're given time to breathe and soak in the world and people, acting as some nice downtime between the chaos. The other big draw I found with this game is the characters. The WarioWare series is well known for just how bombastic and crazy some of the cast can be, and Spookware takes that torch and really runs with it. The interactions between not only the main trio, but everyone they encounter feel engaging and oftentimes funny in ways I don't normally see from a lot of games, especially ones that attempt a more slapstick-styled humor. Blend this all together with some over-the-top cartoonish gore, a mountain of skeleton puns, and a laid-back soundtrack, this is an easy one to recommend. Throughout the many lockdowns and restrictions of going outside, I feel as if I was a little kid with no responsibilities just by the sheer number of games I've played. But something I gravitated towards more than ever is co-op experiences. Usually when it comes to multiplayer, I tend to lean towards PvP games, but bite-sized cooperative gaming has been a great way to catch up with a lot of friends online. Among the Overcooked and Unraileds, one game that really stood out as something beyond fun and adorable was KeyWe. KeyWe is set in a post office in the outback of Australia operated by little kiwi birds. Each level involves a bunch of frantic puzzles where you and your partner must work together to get packages sent out, or general housekeeping around the office such as feeding the cassowaries or sending out messages on a constantly breaking typewriter. While there isn't a ton of variety in the actual mission types themselves, what keeps things interesting was how different seasons affected the level layouts, adding new obstacles to overcome, as well as things called overtime shifts, which won't add to your progress, but they do award extra points for spending. And the overtime missions, I think, is where a lot of the fun can be found. Like there's just this mission where you pop bubble wrap by butt slamming them, and even needing both Kiwis to do it on the biggest one. The only side mission we couldn't get working was the Cassowary Courier course, since that relies on some pretty precise timings that just aren't feasible on NZ to US ping, unfortunately. That said, the connection over such great distance was great, and aside from one optional game being nearly impossible, the rest worked flawlessly. So if you're someone like me in a country with a lot of friends overseas and online games bring an issue of ping, this is a good one to resolve that problem. The big thing me and my KeyWe partner found while playing that made every stage a fun thing to overcome was turning off the tutorial and trying to figure out how everything worked on our own. It made for a much more hectic and satisfying experience, as each one of us would figure something out and call it out to the other person. This style may not be for everyone, but it's a way we found to truly get the most out of our time with the game. Much like Overcooked and the likes of co-op games, levels are timed and rated by stars. You need at least to do the minimum requirements of stars to move on, but getting more will give you more points to spend on cosmetic items that will make a cute KeyWe even cuter. The customization alone sells me on this game, but if you and a friend or a loved one are looking for something to sit back and scream at the TV together, this is a good choice to fill that need.
Take a moment, relax, and remember with Radio Nostalgia from Mars.
Golf Club Wasteland is a game about golf in a wasteland that has become Earth in the future. Don't think anyone really saw that coming based on the title. So a little caveat about this game is that it was released in 2018 as a mobile game for Android and iOS, but was ported this year to PC. But it seemed so criminally unknown on both releases that I had to show it some of the love it deserves despite being a little bit older. I'm not overly familiar with golf games. I played Microsoft Golf way back in the early to mid 90s when it was still being packaged with Windows, some Mario Golf and a bit of Wii Sports. But what sets this game apart from those is, well, it's not really about the golf. Like it is, but it's more of a puzzle game that uses golf. Every hole starts in the ruins of our planet and is usually only accessible by the wealthy elite who need a break from the new settlement on Mars. Using the old buildings and garbage as the course to smash balls through, all set on a 2D plane rather than a 3-dimensional one. This cuts out a lot of the traditional decision making needed to score under par, but replaces them with new ones. What is really at the heart of Golf Club Wasteland though, is the way it builds the world of this future. As you take shots and figure out how to land a ball on a tree stump, so a squirrel won't take it, the radio plays, and it's not just the soundtrack created for this game, which is impressive in its own right, but also has a radio host who interviews guests who have stories to tell about Earth. The way they talk about it varies and really helps paint not only a picture of what happened, but what Mars's colony is like. What's even more impressive about this is the radio is just over 2 hours long, and every song is deeply serene as you evaluate every shot to make sure it counts. And there's even 3 animated music videos to accompany the songs, which is an effort usually reserved for major studios. Raz put out a video recently about games that use sound design to evoke a sense of loneliness, and I would like to add this game to the pile. There's an almost meditative quality to sitting back, scrolling a course, examining every nook and cranny to see if there's any shortcuts, and shooting, all while a radio plays something that feels nostalgic for a moment in time that hasn't even happened yet. It's a reflective loneliness few games can offer. A thing this game is extremely explicit in is its politics, which might be obvious just by looking at screenshots or even this footage. As someone who is deeply left and agrees with a lot of the sentiments, I'll be the first to say it can be a little on the nose. The Mars colony is named Tesla, some of the buildings say fake news, you know, that kind of in-your-face messaging. On the flip side, however, I can respect that decision. We've reached a point in discourse where if you aren't extremely explicit in your messaging, people will misinterpret it for their own gain, so I get it. Just as someone who was in on the commentary from the get-go, it can feel a little too face value. The last thing is, you should play on story mode, because getting under par for each hole will unlock journal entries adding even more layers to what happened down here on Earth when the world eventually turned to shit. I can confidently say there's dozens and dozens of games that have left a lasting emotional impact on me in my time with the medium, but very few have made me sit back and re-evaluate not only my life, but my relationships with the people I loved the most. Lost at Sea has joined the ranks of the few who have managed to do that. An explorative, for lack of a better term, walking simulator with light puzzle solving, Lost at Sea is a game more about the message than the mechanics. You follow Anna, a woman in her mid-50s, as she wanders a strange island inhabited by the memories of her broken past. I don't want to give away too many of the moments that hit me the hardest, so I'm trying to be as vague as possible while still explaining why I love this game so much. Not only is the abstract imagery oftentimes stunning, it's also held up high by an ambient soundtrack that slowly builds as you chase down the fragmented moments of a broken person's life. While it's not focused solely on gameplay, it would be a disservice to say that what's there isn't engaging or interesting. The puzzles themselves reflect the times that either meant the most or reminded her of pain. And there's also fears and regrets that chase you trying to halt your progress. If you don't face them, literally, it will send you back. meaning walking around and exploring isn't just an exercise in holding forward. You always have to be aware. I have seen some people say the performance, at least on PC, can be a bit chuggy, and I love the art style and weird disjointedness of the island. It also can feel a bit blown out at times. I think that adds to the dreamlike and surreal nature of what's happening here. It is just something to keep in mind if you want to purchase this game. Even though I couldn't relate to the specific moments of heartbreak or even joy that was Anna's life, the overall idea of love, loss, and acceptance is something I think everyone can hold on to in one way or another. There's something universal about the idea of a life we've always wanted, and the constant fear that it can be ripped away from us at any second. It's the conveyance of these hopes and anxieties that really made me sit back and think about every single person in my life that I love. Every person I wish I'd said something to before it was too late. Every person I wish I said, I love you too. This might be the weirdest entry on the list so far, but hear me out. Kochu's Dream is a small, weird, and absurd platformer about a man who got turned into a bug by a mysterious mage. It relies a lot on some physics-based platforming. It's fairly cheap, and if that sounds cool to you, I urge you to pick this game up. But what I really want to do here is use Kochu's Dream as a jumping off point to talk about the developer Sokpop Games. Sokpop is a studio I had no idea about until I was browsing Steam looking for games to talk about a few months back. They are a self-described video game boy band, releasing a staggering one game per month via support received on Patreon. The group put out anything from the aforementioned surrealist platformer Kochu's Dream, to Hellblosser, a first-person roguelike, to even an interactive fiction game, Aaron's Bike Trip, where you scan 3D photos and browse around. The amount of content this group puts out challenges that of most people on YouTube that make videos about games, and while they might be smaller, more bite-sized experiences for the cost of coffee in most cities, it feels well worth the point of entry just to see what kind of game they have tackled next. What's even more impressive is their Patreon reward tiers. If you subscribe for $10 a month, you get their source code, which I'm not a developer so I wouldn't know what to do with that information, but I imagine a small handful of you watching this right now are looking to get into the industry, so that could potentially be a valuable resource. I know this sounds like a sponsored section for a development studio's Patreon, and I want to emphasize it isn't. It's just like nothing I've ever seen before, and I have to give as many props as I can to Sokpop for pushing boundaries in so many different ways. I can't help but suggest people either search their name on Steam, or if you can give them a couple of bucks a month, support the video game boy band from the future. Like with every person or group making consistent content, not everything is going to hit for everyone, but I do think there is a game in their catalog that any one person will find interesting, because there is just so much of it to try out. This next game I was a little hesitant to add because in the time since playing it and adding it to my list, it got nominated at the Game Awards under Games for Impact. But unfortunately that feels like a less paid attention to category compared to the others, despite always having some of the best games of the year in there. No Longer Home is a snapshot of a moment in time I think anyone who has ever been to university or college can relate to in one way or another. The time when your student life ends and your real life begins is tough. You and all your friends start to move. Jobs, houses, and all the things we grow attached to get more and more distance as we're forced to become okay with the fact that it's all changing. This is a game that's reflected that better than anything else I've played since maybe A Night in the Woods, where May drops out to go back to a home that looks the same but it feels different. No Longer Home's main cast of Al and Bo have watched that familiarity disappear around them, all while facing the daily struggles of depression, anxiety, and the disassociation that comes with all of that. Playing as a point-and-click adventure in a surrealist landscape with the imagery of the minute mundanity of everyday life, it's a look at how the ordinary can become extraordinary. The idea of putting stock into things that might not matter 2, 5, or even 10 years from now, but in the moment, they're everything. While I found a lot of relatability with the conversations presented and the inner monologue of the main characters, what it also helped do is give me perspective. Perspective on how issues me and so many others face affect marginalized people even more so. Al and Bo are both non-binary, so seeing how things compound on top of that, the epilogue to the game, Friary Road, British names are weird, sets the tone and questioning they go through about not only life as a whole, but who we are in it. We see who our main characters are and the struggles they face going into the game. Something that really struck me about the semi-autobiographical No Longer Home and really resonated deeply is the idea of leaving your rental home with all the things you never did. I've lived in more houses than I can count. My family has moved a lot, and I'm used to leaving places, but within every single one of those places, I saw the potential with something I wanted to do. Especially as I have gotten older, I see gardens I want to grow vegetables out of, sections of yard to build an area for my friends to sit in, but none of those projects came together, and that's something I think this game encapsulates perfectly. This isn't just a story about moving, it's also a story about leaving, and that's something I think we can all find value in and relate to, while also some of us will gain a new perspective. Nix Umbra was my personal biggest surprise on this list because it's not usually the kind of game I play, but it's one I was drawn to in a massive way. There was a review on Steam that gives an elevator pitch better than I ever could, so shout out to Omi Dinon for the review. Take Devil Daggers and slow it down to a Sun album, and you've got one hell of a bleak survival horror experience. Nix Umbra is the most distilled survival horror experience possible. It's just you and a sword covered in flames. You use it to not only guide you, but to fend off enemies who will sneak up on you in the dark. It also speaks to the fact that the best games for audio design in the entire market are horror games, because what it manages to achieve with very little is extremely effective. Not often do games make me sit on the edge of my seat waiting for something to come up behind me, but when it happens, it's a feeling like no other, and I was constantly in that state while playing Nix Umbra. The gameplay loop, at least from what I've been able to discover in the few hours I spent, is to just survive as long as you can. You won't make it far the first few times, but as you do, you'll realize there is a lot more to just walking around and shining the light of fire to ward off monsters. It's a surprisingly deep roguelike experience for what's on display. It won't be the most complex game you've ever played, but what is here shocked me that I was always finding new things to do and see. Just giving you a tagline that says, "Light is my sword, darkness will perish," and leaves you to figure everything else out on your own. It's gloomy and oppressive in the exact right ways a survival horror game should be, and for that I give it a lot of praise. At the risk of ruining some of the discovery for others, I won't say too much, but I will leave you with this. Don't let your first few deaths put you off. Keep pushing and finding ways through it, and you'll be rewarded with the weirdest, bleakest blend of atmospherically dense horror, mixed with roguelikes and an arcade-style game. Haru to Shura is one that was recommended to me by fellow YouTuber Chariot Rider on a whim. I picked it up purely based on the aesthetic of the screenshots. I didn't read anything about it, just saw that it looked cool and only cost a few dollars, so I figured why not. I don't think I will ever fully understand the themes of this game and what it's trying to say, and while that might sound like a bad thing, it was a massive positive for me. Sometimes you just need to let a game guide you through the mind of its creators and try to fill in whatever gaps you can along the way. In a land where only purity exists and negativity isn't even a considered concept, what happens when bad things start to occur? What does it mean to solve conflict when there has never been some before? It's an interesting critique on the idealism of a perfect society, I think. At least that's what I took away from it. Maybe you will read something different about it if you play it. These kinds of games are why I make this list. I pretty much just want more people to talk about them so I can see what their takeaways are and compare them to my own. A lot of the games on this list have amazing soundtracks, and I've kind of steered away from talking about as many of them as I can, since there are only so many ways you can say, "This music bangs." But I have to bring Haru to Shura's up because it perfectly encapsulates the melancholy of what life seems to be here. It's bittersweet while also feeling hopeful. It's about as hard to explain as the game itself, and it just adds that extra needed depth to bring the experience to life. The gameplay is a simple walk and talk to people, trying to uncover mysteries and understand what's going on, but with that said, there are a few choices to make that will lead to different endings. I was wondering if you get all the endings, will that make the whole picture clear? Or will it leave you with more questions than answers? I haven't had the time to find all the different pathways through, and despite really enjoying this game, I'm not sure I want to know everything it has to offer. My interpretation feels like enough to be satisfied with. That kind of guessing is something that feels rare today, with a lot of games leaving you with clear-cut stories. So I want to hold on to this feeling. Even if it isn't true, I'd rather not know. 2021 has been a pretty good small revival of the 3D platformer, with not only the release of Psychonauts 2, Bowser's New Fury, It Takes Two, and Ratchet & Clank Rift Apart, but also some smaller indie ones like Here Comes Nico and Blue Fire. But the one that I think slipped through the cracks the most, which feels almost criminal, is Demon Turf. 3D platformers is the genre I have the biggest soft spot for. It was the game type that dominated my childhood like I'm sure it did many others, and for anyone feeling that nostalgic Mario 64 or Banjo-Kazooie type feeling, this is a must-buy. It has all the movement options of Mario and the charming character interactions of Banjo. You can single, double, triple, wall, side jump, and even float. Comboing together any combination is not only fun, but sometimes necessary to progress through, and it feels so good to do, all wrapped up in what can can only be described as a Paper Mario world smashed with a hat in time. While it channels the past with its core gameplay, it also uses modern sensibilities that have been added to the overall landscapes of games in the time since this genre was king. It has speedrun timers that can be turned on. There's even an Ori-like checkpoint system, so if you find yourself at the bottom of a tough-looking platforming challenge, you can plant a flag and use that as your reset spot, although the use of them is limited to 4 per level, so you need to consider your options when using it. Demon Turf even has remixed B-sides of every world once you defeat the boss. Each stage gets a makeover with added collectibles to find. These collectibles can lead to either more moves that work in a badge system, or cosmetic upgrades for those who want a little bit more self-expression. Unfortunately, with every 3D platformer comes some issues. I think there is a reason this genre became obscure. It's almost impossible to make something that is flawless and with a good amount of content. So little things like the camera being a bit too wonky is a standard, but it's still a bummer to see today. Also, some of the bosses are a bit too unengaging, and the later level design does start to drop off a little bit. That said though, other than those things, there isn't too much to complain about because it is just nice to see something come out and feel fun to play at a base mechanical level. Every time a game like this comes up, I'm reminded just how much I love them. Despite always holding them closely, it's like an old friend coming back to visit after a few years. You start hanging out as if no time had passed, but this time there's some new tricks as well as old favorites. So if you want to hold on to that 3D platformer itch just a little bit longer, you need to buy this game. A Juggler's Tale sits somewhere between Unraveled and Inside, a 2D puzzle platformer about a girl named Abby escaping her tormented life as a circus performer, told through the lens of a puppet master's show in an old-timey pub. This game is so lovingly crafted, from the environments and character designs to the puppeteer's constant rhyme, while he tells the grim tale of a young girl trying to find a new life in a dark, depressing world. Ultimately though, it is a game about the empowerment that comes from breaking free of the restrictions others have tied you to, and finding a new light in whatever direction you take next. More than just an aesthetic or a storytelling device, the puppet strings of Abby are used to craft puzzles and act as either a hindrance or help depending on the situation you find yourself in next. It's a small little detail that goes a really long way. And say even if something is a little bit impossible, like making a long jump, Jack the puppeteer will make a remark about it, really bringing in a cohesive feel to everything that you do. It really feels like a game that has been so carefully thought out down to every single last detail within the confines of its setting. A small detail I really enjoy is how each chapter starts with the hastily painted scenery you would see in a pub show, that then flows into this beautifully modeled 3D environment where every single bit is full of life and little details to spot. It's truly impressive how much of this game's potential has been realized with what seems to be such a small team. A Juggler's Tale is a fairy tale, but on the grim influenced side, which really comes through in a lot of the level design, say the way the trees are alive, and even some of the unfortunate deaths you can run across. It feels like a retelling of an old medieval tale passed down through generations. And since it is that old Germanic style of fairy tale, without giving away too much, I think there's a lot that happens throughout that really makes seeing this game to the end of its somewhat shorter runtime well worth it. Before I close this video out, I just want to quickly reflect on the year that was 2021. This year has been kind of crazy and a lot has happened. Nearer to the start of the year, on the same day Ludwig started his month-long subathon that consumed most of my free time, my computer died. After almost 4 months of back and forth with insurance companies, retailers, repair shops, in the end it was just thrown out without my permission. And after a video I made in that time using borrowed equipment, absolutely bombed harder than anything I've made, I secretly decided to give up on making content for good. It wasn't easy, but it felt like at the time the right thing to do considering all that had happened and the fact my channel was on a decline. Dumping a lot of money into a new computer felt like a waste of money. That was until a lot of friends and those in my Discord who had listened to me suffer daily forced me to start a donation fund to get a new rig. So I did, not expecting much, and what happened was truly overwhelming. A whole new PC was funded overnight, and I truly can never be thankful enough to those who made me not only fundraise, but to everyone who gave any bit of money they could. It really did change my outlook and made me realize I have built a truly special community with this channel. It may not be the biggest, but I do feel incredibly lucky to have cultivated such an amazing audience. So again, thank you all. In that time since getting this new setup, I've made some of what I would consider to be the best content I've ever made. And it is against all odds doing better than a lot of what I've done previously. So here's to whatever is next, and I hope you'll join me.